People think we don't feel anything under that bearskin. That's the part they get wrong. They stand in front of us with their phones, they wave their hands, they make their jokes, and they walk away sure that there's nothing inside the uniform but a man trained to stop being a man for 2 hours at a stretch. Stone, they call us. A statue with a pulse. And I let them think it. We all do. That's half the job. But I'm going to tell you something now that I've only told my wife and a priest, and the priest is dead, so I suppose it doesn't matter who hears it anymore. I'm telling you because I watched a thing happen on that forecourt that I have never been able to put down. 20-odd years I carried it. I'm an old man now, my knees are gone, the bearskin's been handed to younger lads 3 times over. But there are mornings I still wake up and my hands are doing the small thing he taught her. 2 fingers, a tap, a pause, like my body remembers something my head tried to forget. So sit with me a minute. Because this is the story of the quietest man I ever served beside, and the smallest person who ever beat him, and the one bright, loud, terrible morning when the 2 of them needed each other more than either of them knew. His name was Daniel Marsh. We never called him Daniel, mind. On the line you don't have names, you have positions, and you have the man on your left and the man on your right. But off the line in the guardroom with the kettle going and the radiators ticking, he was Danny Marsh, Yorkshire boy, big through the shoulders, soft in the eyes, slow to speak and slower to laugh, but when he laughed it came up from somewhere deep and you felt like you'd earned it. He'd come down to London the way a lot of us did from a town where there wasn't much, into a uniform that promised there'd be something. His dad had been a miner before the pits shut, then a bus driver, then a man who sat in a chair. Danny didn't talk about that much. He talked about his mum, who'd ironed his school shirts so sharp you could have cut bread with the collar, and who told him, the day he left for training, that a man's discipline is just love that's learned to stand still. I thought that was a soft thing to say to a soldier. I changed my mind later. When I first met Danny, he was already known for one thing on the parade square. The lad did not move. Some of the young ones, they fidget. A bead of sweat runs down into the eye and they blink. They twitch, they shift their weight when the sergeant's not looking. Not Danny. You could stand a glass of water on that boy's shoulder and come back at the end of the watch and it wouldn't have rippled. The drill sergeant, who hated everyone equally on principle, once walked the line, stopped in front of Danny, leaned in close enough to fog his collar and said, "Marsh, are you breathing or have you died standing up out of spite?" And Danny didn't move, didn't blink. The corner of his mouth didn't even think about smiling. The sergeant walked off shaking his head, which from him was a standing ovation. That was the man. That was the wall they put in front of the world. Now you have to understand the place itself, because the place is half the story. The forecourt of the palace in those years was a strange piece of ground. On one side of the railings you had the most disciplined men in the country standing in a silence so total you could hear the pigeons land. On the other side you had the whole world, coaches from 40 countries, school trips, honeymooners, a man selling little plastic Union Jacks that snapped in the first stiff breeze, a woman who came every single day to feed the birds until they stopped her. The noise out there never died. Cameras. Children crying. A bagpiper down by the gates who could not actually play the bagpipes and seemed determined to prove it to everyone. And the weather. London weather doesn't make up its mind, it just changes it. You go on at the morning watch under a sky like wet cement, and by the time you came off the sun would be out, the puddles flashing, the whole forecourt steaming gently like a kettle that's just been lifted. Then the next day, the opposite. Rain that came in sideways off the park and got under the bearskin and ran down the back of your neck and pooled, cold, just above your belt, and you stood there and you let it. You don't move. The whole world can be falling on you, and you don't move. That's where it all happened, right there, between the silence and the noise. I should tell you how the little one came into it, because that's the thing people never believe. There was, in those years, a young princess. I won't tell you which house, and I won't tell you the names you might be wanting, because that's not mine to give and it never was. Call her Alois. That's not her name, but it's close enough to the shape of her, and she'd have liked it, I think. She liked things that sounded like a song. She was 7. 7 going on 70 in some lights, the way some children are, and then in the next breath she'd be entirely 7 again, all scabbed knees and lost teeth and a coat that was always coming half off one shoulder. She had a way of looking at a grown-up sideways, weighing them, deciding whether they were worth the trouble. Most of them she decided weren't. She decided Danny was. It started small, the way these things do. The royal children, when they were small, would sometimes be brought through the inner forecourt by their people, a nanny, a protection officer, somebody. Not for the public bit, you understand. Away from the gates. And the first time Alois came past Danny on the inner post, she stopped dead in the middle of whatever she was being walked toward, planted her little feet, and stared up at him with her head tipped right back so the bearskin filled her whole sky. The nanny tugged her hand. "Come on, Poppet." Alois didn't come on. She said, very clearly, in the voice of a girl who has discovered something the adults are too busy to notice. "Is he real?" And the nanny laughed and said, "Of course he's real, darling," and pulled her along. But here's the thing. Alois looked back, twice. And the second time, I swear to you, she narrowed her eyes at Danny like a detective who's seen through the alibi, because she knew. Children always know. They can feel the difference between a statue and a person pretending very hard to be one. There's a warmth that comes off a living thing, and a child can stand in it like standing near a fire with your eyes shut. She came back the next day, and the day after. For a while it was a game on her side, and a discipline on his. She'd plant herself in front of him, close as she was allowed, which her people kept widening and narrowing depending on how patient they were that morning, and she'd try to make him move. She'd pull faces, crossed eyes, fish lips, the lot. She'd tell him jokes the way 7-year-olds tell jokes, which is to say with no setup and a punchline that makes sense only to them. "Why did the horse," she said once, "have a hat? Because." And then she waited, very pleased with herself, for him to break. He didn't break. But and I was there for this. I was on the post beside him, and I had to fight my own face the whole time. He wasn't ignoring her either. There was a thing he did. When she landed a particularly good one, when she crossed her eyes and went boss-eyed and stuck her tongue out the side of her mouth, you could see, if you knew exactly where to look, the smallest tightening at the corner of his jaw. The muscle that holds a laugh down. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. And it made her wild with delight, because she knew she was getting somewhere, even if she couldn't prove it. He nearly laughed, she informed the nanny, triumphant. "He's a guardsman, Poppet. They never laugh." "He nearly did," said Alois, with the absolute certainty of a child who is right. She was right. I asked Danny about it once, in the guardroom, the radiators ticking, the rain doing its thing outside. "That little one," I said, "she'll get you a charge sheet if you're not careful." He had his big hands round a mug of tea. He looked into it for a long moment, the way he looked into everything, like there might be an answer at the bottom if he waited. "She's lonely," he said. That was all, but it landed strange in the warm little room, because it was true and none of us had said it out loud. You don't think of it, do you? A child like that. Everything in the world. People to dress her and feed her and walk her about and stand between her and the cameras. And underneath all of it, a small girl who has worked out that the most reliable person in her whole enormous life is a man in a fur hat who isn't allowed to talk to her. "She comes to me," Danny said, "because I can't go anywhere. D.U.C. Everyone else in her life can leave. They come and they go, the nannies change, the people change, but I'm always there. Same spot, same time, rain or shine. I'm the one thing that doesn't move." He turned the mug a half turn. "Kids need something that doesn't move." I didn't have anything to say to that. I drank my tea. Now I come to the quiet moment. The one this whole story is named for. And I want to tell it slowly, because it went fast in life and I've spent 20 years slowing it down. It was a gray morning in the early autumn. The kind where the air's gone cool but the leaves haven't turned yet, so the trees in the park still look like summer that's run out of money. Thin crowd. A school group somewhere being shushed. The bagpiper, mercifully, not yet arrived. Alois came through with just her protection officer that morning, a good man, quiet, watchful, the sort who saw everything and said almost nothing. I'll call him Reg. And Alois was not herself. You could see it. The little shoulders were up around her ears. She wasn't trying to make Danny laugh. She came and stood in front of him and just leaned, as much as she dared, toward the one thing that didn't move. Reg's radio said something low and crackly, and he stepped a few paces off to answer it, keeping her in the corner of his eye the way good men do. And in that little pocket of nobody listening, Alois looked up at Danny and said, in a small, flat voice that wasn't a 7-year-old's voice at all, "I got lost yesterday." Danny didn't move. You understand he couldn't, but I was close and I heard her and I felt the whole of him go still in a different way, not statue still, listening still. "In the shop," she said. "There were so many people, and I let go of the hand for 1 second, and then I couldn't see anyone I knew, and I called out but everybody was talking and nobody heard me, and I didn't know what to do, Her chin was going. That awful wobble a child gets when the fear comes back up out of where they'd buried it. "And I couldn't shout loud enough," she said. "My voice went small. Why does your voice go small when you're scared? It's the worst time for it to go small." Reg was still on the radio, 20 feet off, back half turned. And Danny did a thing I have never seen another guardsman do, before or since. He spoke. Barely, out of the side of his mouth, hardly a breath, the way we learned to pass a word down the line without the drill sergeant catching it. So quiet that if you weren't a guardsman trained to hear exactly that frequency, you'd have missed it entirely. He said, "Listen to me, love. I'm going to teach you something. I want to be honest with you. What he did was against everything. A guardsman on a public post does not speak, does not engage, does not, and they drill this into you until it's in the marrow, break the wall, not for anyone, not for a queen, not for a crying child, not for the end of the world. The wall is the wall. That's the whole point of it." And he broke it for her, quietly, while Reg's back was turned. I should have reported it. I have never once been sorry I didn't. When you're scared, Danny breathed, eyes front, not a muscle moving but the lips, and your voice goes small and the grown-ups can't hear you, you don't need a loud voice. You need a sign, something nobody else will notice but the right person will. You understand? Alois's chin stopped wobbling. She'd gone very still herself now, the way children do when an adult is finally, giving them something useful instead of telling them it'll all be fine. "What sign?" she whispered. "2 fingers, Danny said. "Like this, no, don't do it now, just remember it. 2 fingers, the first 2, and you tap twice, on your own leg or on a wall or on the back of someone's hand. Tap, tap, then you wait. Then tap, tap again, slow, like a little heartbeat that's lost. Anyone who knows the sign, and I'm going to make sure the people who keep you safe all know it, anyone who sees that, they'll know. They'll know you're not playing. They'll know you need them right now and you can't say it out loud. And they'll come, they'll always come. Tap, tap, wait, tap, tap." I watched a 7-year-old commit that to memory like it was the only thing in the world that had ever mattered. Lips moving. Tap, tap, wait, tap, tap, filing it away somewhere deep. "Why 2 fingers?" she asked. Of course she asked. She asked everything. And Danny, God love him, said, "Because 1 finger's an accident, 3's a wave, 2's a secret, 2 means you." Reg came back from his radio call then, slid his eyes over the scene, found nothing out of place. A guardsman standing his post, a small girl standing in front of him doing nothing in particular, and said, "Come on then, your Nan's expecting you." Alois turned to go, but at the door she stopped, and she looked back at Danny one more time, the way she always did, twice, like a detective. And the second time she lifted her small hand, where Reg couldn't see, down by her side. 2 fingers, tap tap, a pause, tap tap. "Practicing." Danny didn't move, couldn't, but I was watching his eyes, and I'll go to my own grave swearing it, something in them answered her. A door opening a crack and shutting again. Message received. I've got you. Always. Then she was gone, the door closing on the little click of her shoes, and the forecourt filled back up with the noise of the whole loud world. And the two of us stood there in our furs being statues again, like nothing on earth had just happened. That night in the guardroom, I finally said it. Danny, you spoke to her, on the post. He didn't deny it. He never lied, that man, not even small. He just looked into his tea. She got lost, he said. Yesterday, in a crowd. A child like that in a crowd, and her voice went small. That's what protection officers are for. He turned the mug. And a protection officer can't always see her face, can't always be looking the right way. There's a half a second in a crowd when even the best of them has his eyes somewhere else. He looked up at me, and there was something in his face I didn't have a word for then, and I think I do now. It was fear. Not for himself. He'd no fear left over for himself. It was the particular fear of a man who has imagined, in full and terrible detail, the worst thing that could happen to someone small, and has decided he would rather break every rule in the book than let it. I just wanted her to have a way, he said, of being heard. Even when she can't make a sound, that's all, a way of being found. I didn't understand then why a grown man would carry that the way he carried it, why it sat so heavy on him. A lost child in a shop, it's every parent's worst hour, but she'd been found, hadn't she? No harm done. I understood later. I understood on the morning the world tore open at the edge of Hyde Park, with 12,000 people in it, and the air going white and everybody's voice, every single one, going small at once. But that's the next part of the story, and I'll need a minute before I tell it right. I've had my minute. Where was I? The signal. Tap tap, wait, tap tap. A secret between a man who couldn't move and a girl whose voice went small. What I didn't tell you, because I didn't want to get ahead of it, is that Danny meant the second part of what he'd said. I'm going to make sure the people who keep you safe all know it. He wasn't just soothing her. The man went and did it. Now he couldn't go marching into the household saying, "Excuse me, I taught the princess a hand signal off my own bat while I was meant to be a statue." That'd have had him off the post and scrubbing pans by tea time. But Danny knew Reg, the protection officer, the way you come to know the men who stand near you for years without ever quite being friends. And one evening, off duty, out of uniform, just two ordinary blokes by the gate having a smoke that neither of them was really smoking, Danny told him. I know because Reg told me years after at Danny's. Well, at the end of it, we'll get there. Reg said his first instinct was to be furious. A guardsman freelancing, teaching his principal a signal he hadn't cleared with anyone. It was 100 kinds of wrong. And then Reg said he thought about it for about 4 seconds, and he stopped being furious. Because it was a good idea. It was, in fact, a better idea than anything in the manual. A small child in a crowd, separated, frightened, voice gone, and instead of being lost and helpless, she has a thing she can do with her own 2 hands that means find me now, I'm not playing. A thing she can do silently. A thing she can do if someone's hand is over her mouth. A thing she can do if she's too frightened to make a sound. Reg didn't report it. Reg adopted it. He quietly taught it to the small handful of people who needed to know, the other officers on the rotation, the senior nanny, 1 or 2 others I never learned the names of. He framed it as his own idea, to keep Danny out of it, and Danny let him, because Danny didn't care whose idea anybody thought it was. He only cared that it worked. And so this thing that a Yorkshire guardsman invented on a grey morning out of pure love and pure fear became, for a little while, a real protocol around a real child. Tap tap. Wait, tap tap. The lost heartbeat. You. Nobody wrote it down. That was the beauty of it. A secret only works if it stays small. The seasons turned, the way they do. Autumn went to that dead flat London winter where it's dark when you go on and dark when you come off, and the bearskin gets so heavy with rain it feels like a punishment. Then the slow, grudging spring, the park greening up, the daffodils coming through along the mall in their stupid, hopeful thousands. And all through it, Alois kept coming. Grew, the way they do when you're not looking. I'd glance over and think, when did her face get longer? When did she lose that baby roundness? She lost teeth and grew new ones too big for her mouth. She got a phase of wanting to be a vet, then a phase of wanting to be a pirate, then a long, serious phase of wanting to be, of all things, a librarian, because she'd worked out a librarian was someone who was allowed to be quiet and surrounded by stories at the same time, and she thought that sounded like heaven. She stopped trying to make Danny laugh. That game wore out. What replaced it was better and stranger. She'd come and stand near him and just talk, tell him things. Out the side of her mouth now, she'd learned it off him, the guardsman's trick of speaking without seeming to. She'd report on her week, the librarian phase, a row with a cousin, a dream she'd had. The fact that her grandmother had been sad lately and nobody would say why, and it frightened her, the not being told. And Danny stood there and didn't move and didn't answer and heard every word. Now and then when Reg's back was turned and the world wasn't watching, he'd breathe something back, just a few words. That's a good ambition, vet. Cousins are like that, give it a week. Grown-ups not telling you things, that's them being frightened. Love, not you being too small. Just enough. Just so she knew the wall was warm. She always practiced the signal before she left, every single time. Down by her side, 2 fingers, tap, tap, wait, tap, tap, where only Danny could see. It had become a kind of goodbye between them. I remember. I've still got it. I know you'd come. And every single time, Danny's eyes answered, always. I used to think it was the sweetest thing I'd ever seen, and a bit of a worry besides. The bond was real and it was good for both of them. I think it kept Danny human, in a job that's designed to sand the human off you. But there was a part of me, the old soldier part, that thought, this can't last. Children grow up. Postings change. One day she'll come through and he'll have moved on to ceremonial duties or back up north or out of the army altogether. And there'll be a different man on that spot. And she'll do her little signal at a stranger and feel like a fool. And that'll be that. That's how these things go. They don't end with a bang. They end with somebody just not being there one morning. I was wrong about how it would end. I have to tell you about the spring it happened, because the city was a particular way that spring, and the particular way mattered. There'd been a mood building for months. You felt it before you could name it. We all did. There's a thing that gets into a city in certain seasons, a low hum of unease, and the men whose job is to stand still all day get very good at feeling it because we've nothing to do but feel. The briefings got longer. The intelligence chatter, and they'd tell us as much as they could, which was never much, got darker. There were threats. There are always threats, you have to understand. If the public knew how many threats come across the desk in a normal week, they'd never leave the house. Most are nothing, cranks, drunks, sad, lonely men who want to feel big for an afternoon. But that spring, some of them weren't nothing. You could tell by how the senior men went quiet in a particular way, by the extra faces around the place who didn't introduce themselves, by the fact that leave got harder to come by and nobody would say why. And the thing everyone was bracing around, the thing the whole season seemed to be tightening toward, was the gathering in the park. It was a great public event, a charity thing, grown enormous over the years, a walk, a concert, the whole sweep of the park given over to it for a day, with a stage and a crowd they were expecting to top 12,000. And royalty would be there. Several of them. Out among the people, the way the public loves and the security men dread, shaking hands along a rope line, doing the walkabout, being human and reachable on a day designed for it. Alois was going to be there. I knew because she told Danny out the side of her mouth 3 days before, practically vibrating with it. I'm going to the park thing, the big one. I get to go this year. I've never been to a big one. And then quieter, the old fear surfacing through the excitement the way it always did with her. There'll be so many people, won't there? Thousands and thousands. And Danny, eyes front, not a muscle moving, breath back. You've got your sign. I've got my sign, she said. Then you've nothing to be frightened of. Crowds are just lots of people who'd help you if they knew, and the ones who matter will know. She did the signal before she left. Tap tap, wait, tap tap. Slower than usual that day, I noticed. More careful, like she was checking the locks before a long journey. The night before in the guardroom, Danny was wrong. Not in anything he said. In something he didn't. He was quiet even for him. The radiators ticking, the rain, there's always rain in the part of a story where you wish there wasn't, coming down soft on the high windows. He had his tea and he wasn't drinking it. "You're off tomorrow," I said. "The park, you're on the cordon, aren't you?" He turned the mug. "Static post, edge of the green zone, near the southern approach." "Big day for the little one. Her first big one," she said. He nodded, and then he said a thing that I've turned over in my mind 10,000 times since, because I genuinely think some part of him knew. Not knew, felt. The way you can feel weather coming in your bad knee before the sky says a word about it. "I don't like crowds that size," he said. 12,000, you can't see a crowd that size. You can only see the bit in front of you. The rest is just noise and weather. Anything could be moving in it, anything at all, and nobody'd know till it surfaced." He looked into his tea. "A man could stand his post perfect all day, do everything right, never move a muscle, and the thing that mattered could happen 40 feet to his left and he'd never see it coming. You're a cheerful soul tonight." He almost smiled, almost, the jaw muscle thing. "Sorry, Mum always said I think too much for a man whose job's to think about nothing." He finally drank some tea. "It'll be a grand day. Sun's meant to shine, she'll love it." "She will." He set the mug down. "Tap tap," he said to no one, very quietly, almost to himself. "Wait, tap tap." I thought it was nothing. A man going over a thing in his head the way you do, checking the locks before a long journey. I think now it was a prayer. The morning came up exactly as promised. That's the cruelty of it, looking back. The most beautiful morning of the whole year. The kind of London spring day they put on postcards and never deliver. Sky a clean, washed blue, not a cloud in it that meant anything. The park gone fully green at last. The grass that electric new color it only is for about a week. The horse chestnuts in full candle. Warm enough by 9 that men were taking their jackets off, and women had bare arms, and everyone, the whole city, seemed to have decided to be happy at the same time, the way they do maybe 3 days a year. 12,000 people and climbing. They came up from the tube in rivers, families with pushchairs and picnic bags and homemade banners, old couples in their good coats, teenagers in packs, a man with a dog in a charity vest. Balloons, God, the balloons, hundreds of them, every color, bobbing over the crowd like the day itself had bubbled up. The smell of cut grass and hot donuts and sun cream. A brass band somewhere, warming up, getting the same 8 bars wrong over and over in the cheerful way bands do. Children everywhere. Children absolutely everywhere. Let off the lead by the sunshine. Running in that headlong way they run when the grass is big, and the day is endless, and nothing in the whole world has ever gone wrong or ever will. I wasn't on duty that day. I want you to know that. I've carried a lot from that morning, but I never had to carry that I was off post when it happened, because I wasn't posted. I was there as a man. Day off. I'd come to watch, the way you do, to see the show, to see the spectacle of all those people being glad together. I was over by the bandstand with a coffee going cold in my hand. So I saw it the way the public saw it, not from a post, from inside the crowd. Danny was where he'd said he'd be. Southern approach, edge of the green zone, a static post on the cordon. I'd clocked him earlier, you always clock your own, in a crowd. The eye finds the bearskin like a bird finds north. He was a still dark column at the edge of all that color and motion. The one thing that didn't move. People drifted past him with their phones and their children and their balloons, and he stood, and the river of the day went around him like water round a stone. And somewhere in that river, I didn't see her yet, but she was there, was a girl of 9 now, holding a grown-up's hand in a crowd of 12,000, on the most beautiful morning of the year, with 2 fingers and a secret she'd practiced every day for 2 years and had never once needed. The band got their 8 bars right, finally, and the crowd cheered the way a crowd will cheer anything on a good day. It was 11:14 in the morning. At 11:17 the world came apart. But I'll tell you about that in the last part, and I'll tell you straight all of it, the parts that are hard to say, because that's the only way it's worth telling. Give me 1 more minute. It didn't sound the way you'd think. That's the first thing nobody believes. You imagine a bomb sounds like the films, a great rolling boom you'd recognize. It doesn't. It's not a sound you hear so much as a thing that happens to your whole body at once. A flat, hard slap of air that you feel in your chest before your ears catch up, and then a silence, a real silence, a held breath of a second where the whole park forgot how to make noise, and then everything after that came back wrong. It was over by the eastern stage, a long way from Danny, a long way from me. I want to say that plainly. I never saw the worst of it up close, and I'm glad, and I won't pretend to you that I did. What I saw was the wave. Because after that flat slap of air and that held breath silence, 12,000 people did the only thing 12,000 people can do. They ran. You've never seen a thing like it, and I pray you never do. A crowd that size doesn't run like people run. It runs like water, like a tide that's decided. The whole green sheet of the park, all that color and all those balloons and all those happy families, it just turned all at once and became one enormous frightened animal trying to get out through gaps far too small for it. The screaming started then late, the way it does. And the screaming was the worst part because under it, threaded all through it, were the small voices. The children's voices, thousands of them, all going small at once. Why does your voice go small when you're scared? It's the worst time for it to go small. I thought of her in that instant. Before I thought of anything else, before I thought of my own 2 feet, I thought, Alois is in this. The tide came south. That's the thing about a panicked crowd. It doesn't run toward safety, because it doesn't know where safety is. It runs away from the thing. And the thing was at the eastern stage, so the crowd ran west and south, a great hopeless surge of human beings toward the southern approach, toward the exits that were never built for 12,000 people leaving in 9 seconds. Toward Danny's post. Now you have to understand what his job was at that moment, and why what he did was the hardest thing a man can do. His instinct, every instinct in him, every cell was to break ranks and go find her. I know it was. I knew that man. The whole reason the signal existed was the fear of exactly this. A child lost in a crowd, and now the crowd was real and enormous and coming apart, and she was somewhere in it. Everything in Danny Marsh wanted to abandon that post and dive into the river and pull her out of it with his bare hands. And he couldn't. Because at the southern approach, in those first 60 seconds, the danger wasn't the bomb anymore. The bomb had already done what it was going to do. The danger now was the crowd itself. 12,000 people funneling toward an exit gap that would jam and back up and start to crush. And people don't die in the blast. Not most of them. Most of them die in the minutes after, in the crush, trampled, suffocated standing up, when a panicked crowd folds in on itself at a bottleneck. He'd been briefed on it 100 times. We all had. The cordon men at the exits weren't there to look pretty. They were there for exactly this. To hold. To channel. To turn a stampede back into a river. To stand immovable in front of a wall of terror and by the sheer fact of not moving give 12,000 running people something to flow around instead of pile into. If Danny left his post to find one child, the gap behind him could jam, and dozens, maybe hundreds, could die in the crush he'd opened. So he stood. I saw him. Through the chaos across 100 yards of screaming park, I found the bearskin the way the eye always finds it. And it was not moving. The whole world was a flood and he was the stone in it. Arms out, I think, I couldn't see clearly, turning the human tide, opening it, splitting it round him so it could keep moving instead of jamming. People crashing past him on both sides. A man who'd spent his whole life learning to be the one thing that doesn't move, doing it now when it was the only thing keeping people alive, while every fiber of him screamed to run. His mum was right. I think of it every day. A man's discipline is just love that's learned to stand still. He stood, while his heart was 40 feet away in the crowd, screaming his name in a voice gone small. He stood. She found him. I didn't see the start of it. Reg told me the start of it after, in the worst conversation of my life. Reg had been with her, of course he had, good man, he never left her side, and in the first slap of the blast he'd done his job. He'd got his body over her, got her down, and then the tide hit them, and that's all it takes. One surge. One shoulder from a running stranger. His hand was torn off hers. He went one way in the flood, and she went the other, and then there were 10,000 legs between them, and he was screaming her name into a wall of noise that ate it whole. She was 9 years old on the ground, in a forest of running legs, and her voice had gone small. Exactly as he'd feared. Exactly as he'd known, that gray morning 2 years before, when he broke every rule he had because he'd imagined this in full and terrible detail, and decided he would not let it stand. She couldn't shout. Reg said when he finally got to her, after, her throat was raw but not from screaming, from trying to scream and nothing coming. The fear takes your voice. It just takes it. A 9-year-old child alone on the ground in a crushing crowd, and the one tool every adult tells you to use: shout, call out, make noise, gone, useless, stolen. But she had another tool. She had a sign. Here is the part I will tell you about for the rest of my life, and I will tell it the same way every time, because it is true, and because it is the only thing I have ever been certain was holy. She got up. Somehow in that she got up, and she did the thing he'd taught her about a crowd. Crowds are just lots of people who'd help you if they knew. She looked for the one who'd know, and in all that flood and color and terror, she looked for the one thing that wasn't moving. North, the bearskin, the stone in the river. She fought toward him, a 9-year-old against the grain of a stampede, fighting toward the danger everyone else was fighting away from, because she knew, with the whole certainty of a child who has been told one true thing and believed it, that if she could just reach the one that didn't move, she'd be found. She couldn't get all the way, the crowd was too strong. She got close enough, and she couldn't shout and she couldn't reach him, and she was being swept past, sideways, away. So she did it. She lifted her 2 fingers, the first 2, where he might see, in all that chaos, if he was looking, if he was the man she thought he was. Tap, tap. Wait. Tap, tap. The lost heartbeat, you. He saw it. Across the flood, through the screaming, with 1,000 frightened faces between them, that man, who could pick a familiar frequency out of a parade ground roar, who'd spent 2 years watching for exactly that small motion of exactly that small hand. He saw it. And Danny Marsh broke his post. For the second time in his life. The first time was to give her the sign. The second time was to answer it. He went into the crowd. Against the grain, the way she'd come, the immovable man finally moving, and moving the wrong way, into the danger against 12,000 people, toward one. I lost the bearskin for a second in the chaos, and my heart stopped, and then I found it again, lower now, plunging through the flood, and I understood he was forcing a path with his whole body, shoulders and arms, opening a channel through solid, panicked human beings by sheer bloody-minded Yorkshire refusal, the way he'd refused to blink with a sergeant fogging his collar, the way he'd refused everything that ever tried to move him. And he got to her. He got to her. I saw the moment his arms closed around her. I'll see it when I die. A great dark shape folding down over a small bright one in the middle of all that terror, and for 1 second, in the worst place in the world, there was a still point. The stone and the heartbeat. Found. There was a second device. I'm not going to dwell on it. You don't need it and I don't want it. There are things a man can describe and things he shouldn't, and I've made my peace with which is which. So I'll tell you only what matters, and what matters is this. When the second one came, Danny had her. And he did the last thing, the only thing. The thing his whole still life had been a rehearsal for without any of us knowing. He put himself between her and it. All of him. That big frame that wouldn't move for a drill sergeant or a downpour or the end of the world. He made it move one final time, and he made it a wall. The way the wall had always really been, not a thing to keep her out, but a thing to keep her safe, and he took it so she didn't. She lived. I need you to know that first before anything else. She lived. 9 years old, and she walked out of that park. Carried out really, in the arms of the men who got to her after. And there were cuts, and there was shock, and there were nightmares for years. Reg told me. But she lived, whole, and she grew up. And she is grown now somewhere, doing whatever it is she does. And I would put my own life on the table to bet that she has never once in all the years since gone into a crowd without checking that her 2 fingers still work. She lived because a man taught her a secret on a gray morning when he was meant to be a statue. And Danny didn't. He held on for 2 days. I sat with him for some of it. They let me at the end, because by then the rules had all gone soft the way they do around a dying man, and somebody senior who knew what he'd done made sure of it. He was mostly not there those 2 days. But there was a moment near the end when his eyes came open and found me, and he was, for about 30 seconds, entirely himself. The little one, he said, his voice was nearly gone. Small, funny that, after everything, his voice had gone small. She's safe, Danny, I said. You did it, she's safe, she's home. And the corner of his mouth did the thing. The jaw muscle thing. The laugh he always held down. Only this time he let a little of it out, the smallest breath of it, and it was the most beautiful and the most terrible sound I have ever heard. She used the sign, he said. Not a question, he knew he'd seen it. She remembered. She remembered. Knew she would. His eyes were drifting. Good lass, 2 fingers tap tap. His own hand moved on the white sheet barely, the 2 fingers tap tap, wait, tap tap, the lost heartbeat, slower now and slower, wait, tap tap. And then his hand went still. And for the first time in all the years I knew him, Danny Marsh being still didn't look like discipline. It just looked like rest. They didn't put his name in the papers the way they should have. The household kept it quiet, and I understood why, and I hated it, and I understand it still. There are reasons. There's a child to protect. You don't splash Guardsman dies shielding princess from second blast across the front pages and feed her, for the rest of her life, to people who'd want to make a story of her. Danny would have understood that better than anyone. The whole point of the signal was that a secret only works if it stays small. So the world doesn't know him. The world thinks, if it thinks of that morning at all, that some guards were brave that day, that some people were saved, that it was a tragedy and a heroism in roughly the proportions the news likes. The world doesn't know there was a man called Danny Marsh from a town up north where there wasn't much, who couldn't move and wouldn't move and then moved exactly twice in his whole career, both times for the same small girl, the second time straight into the fire. But Reg knows, and I know, and the men who carried his coffin know, 6 of us, and the weight of it on my shoulder is the realest thing I own. And she knows. She came to it, the funeral. They brought her, quiet, no fuss, in among the family seats with her face down. 9 years old in a black coat that was coming half off one shoulder the way her coats always did. And I watched her the whole time because I couldn't not, and she was very still, stiller than a 9-year-old should know how to be, and I thought she learned that from him too. How to hold still when everything in you wants to come apart. And at the end, when the box went by, close enough to touch, she lifted her hand. Down by her side, where she thought no one could see. 2 fingers tap tap, a pause tap tap. The lost heartbeat, the secret you. Goodbye, in the only language the 2 of them ever really shared. And I had to turn my face to the wall of that great cold church, an old soldier in his good coat, and let it come, because there are some things a man cannot stand still through, and that was one, and I'm not ashamed of it anymore. People think we don't feel anything under that bearskin. I let them think it for a lot of years. It's half the job, like I said. They stand in front of us and wave their hands and make their jokes and walk away sure there's nothing in the uniform but a man trained to stop being a man. But I'll tell you what's really under there. Now I'm old and the hat's been handed on, and there's no sergeant left alive to charge me for saying it. Under there is a man holding still, and holding still isn't nothing. Holding still is the hardest thing there is. Holding still while the rain runs down your neck, while your legs scream, while a child cries, while the whole loud world goes by and never once wonders what it costs, that's not the absence of feeling. That's feeling held. Love learned to stand still, just like his mum said. And once in a great while, when it matters more than the standing, a man like that will move. He'll move for the one thing worth moving for. He'll go against the whole tide of the world toward one small hand making one small sign, and he'll get there. He always gets there. Because that was the secret in the end, bigger than the signal. The signal was just 2 fingers and a pause. The real secret was the promise underneath it, the one he made her on a gray morning and kept on a bright one with the last move of his life. When you can't make a sound, I'll still hear you. When you can't be found, I'll find you. You won't be lost, not while I'm standing here. They'll come, they'll always come. So the next time you're in London, and you pass one of those still dark men in the fur hats, and the tourists are waving their hands and making their jokes, do me one kindness. Don't try to make him laugh. Just look at him a moment and know what's under there. A man holding the whole weight of his own heart perfectly still, in case somebody small should ever need him not to move. And somewhere out there, a woman grown now, who was once a frightened girl on the ground in a forest of legs, still carries 2 fingers and a secret, and a debt she can never pay, to the one thing in all her enormous life that never moved. Until the day it did.